Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. Today I'm going to have a bit of fun and show you how to make my mini pancake cereal, which has been trending on TikTok, but some of you may already know this as silver dollar pancakes. And as with all of my keto recipes, this recipe is sugar-free and gluten-free, and also this particular recipe is dairy-free. I'm really pleased with this keto dairy-free pancake recipe because it has a really amazing fresh taste and because I think this batter has a perfect texture. I've actually experimented with several methodologies, both in making the batter and how to fry it up. So if you take the time and watch all the way to the end, I'll show you the bloopers I have and what happened as a result of my experiments. For your information, this mini pancake cereal recipe has a macronutrient ratio of 3.4 to 1 with 7 grams of total carbs, but 4.6 grams of soluble fiber, 0.3 grams of insoluble fiber, and resulting in only 2.1 grams of net carbs per generous serving. The first thing I do is I always assemble all of my ingredients. And for this recipe, if you can, please take your eggs out long enough for them to get to room temperature. And also while you're at it, melt your refined coconut oil. The reason I prefer the refined coconut oil because the pancakes have such a light, delicate taste. I don't want the coconut flavor to overpower the taste of the rest of the ingredients. But if you don't have refined coconut oil, you could also use MCT oil, since it also doesn't have a flavor. And then separate the eggs, putting the whites into one bowl and the yolks into a separate bowl. And then after you've separated your eggs into whites and yolks, to the bowl with the egg yolks, place a fine mesh sieve over the bowl and then add the almond flour. The next ingredient I added was psyllium husk powder, not the whole psyllium husk this time. You want the powder for a better texture. Then add your choice of powdered or confectioner's sweetener. I use monk fruit erythritol blend, which I grind into a powder myself. Next I add the glucomannan, which provides the mini pancake batter a nicer texture and, when they're done, a better structure. The baking powder, add the coconut flour, and the salt. Then use a whisk or a spatula, whatever you have handy, and stir the ingredients in the whisk so that they will pass through the sieve. The purpose of aerating all your dry ingredients through a sieve is especially important since nut flours tend to be a bit wetter and more clumpy, and by aerating them, you'll end up with a much smoother, more even batter. If you notice that some of the ingredients right at the end have not gone through the sieve, just toss them in at the end. Then simply whisk to combine all the ingredients in the bowl. Now I'm going to add my melted coconut oil or your MCT oil and just whisk or stir to combine. Now it's time to pour the almond milk into the bowl, and also don't forget to toss in the lemon zest and stir again until the batter mixture is almost lump-free. Don't worry if you can't get all the lumps. Then set the bowl with the batter aside to rest for about 5 minutes. This will allow the almond and coconut flour to absorb the almond milk and to thicken up to a nice pancake batter consistency. Then take your bowl with the egg whites, and you can use a stand mixer or hand mixer, whatever you prefer. Add the lemon juice and whip at high speed until the whites have formed a stiff peak stage. After your batter has rested and you notice that it's much thicker, whisk vigorously either by hand or with an electric hand mixer. And you're doing this in order to remove any large lumps that may still remain in the batter. But don't worry if you don't get them all. Now, ladle about 1 to 2 cups of the whipped egg whites into the bowl with the batter mixture. And then briskly stir the egg whites into the batter mixture. This will loosen up the batter and make it much easier to keep the pancakes fluffy when you add the rest of the egg whites. Now, add about half of the remaining egg whites to the batter bowl. And this time gently fold the egg whites into the batter. To do the folding, I like to use my stand mixer's large balloon whisk. But a very thin metal spatula also works very well. Just don't use a thick plastic spatula. That will break too many of the air bubbles. Then repeat and add the rest of the egg whites and fold in gently. But don't be too alarmed if while you're folding your egg whites you notice that there is some deflation. That's to be expected. But be as careful as you can not to overfold or to deflate the egg whites too much. Now, because we're going to be making mini pancakes, I like to use a piping bag. This will give me the best results and the best control. Please note that I'm cutting a very small hole for an opening in this piping bag. You don't want the batter to come out too quickly. So the first thing I like to do is put my piping bag into a tall glass and then put some of the batter into the piping bag. And now we're almost ready to pan fry. So using a non-stick frying pan or crepe pan, just a quick FYI, this process will not work very well with a greased regular frying pan. You don't have to do this step, but if your pan is fairly new or very dry, take a little bit of your coconut oil and grease the pan, and then take a tissue and wipe up the pan so that the surface of the frying pan is almost dry. Now get your piping bag and quickly but very gently squeeze out very small medallions. A good idea is to start at the center and work towards the edges of the pan. And continue making these tiny medallions until you have filled the entire surface of your pan. But as you're doing so, remember, you have to leave a little bit of room between each of the medallions, and also don't bring them too close to the edge of the pan. Then cover your frying pan or crepe pan with a lid. Place it on your stove top and cook over medium-low or low heat until the bottom of your mini pancakes are set, just like regular pancakes. I used a very low heat setting because I wanted my mini pancakes to have a light color. It took about 3 to 4 minutes per batch of pancakes. But your time will depend on the stovetop heat you're using. So keep an eye on them and flip them when you think they're ready. And when the bottom of the mini pancakes are done, the next step is to gently flip each pancake. I tried several different techniques. I found that using a fork or fork and knife was the easiest way to flip the tiny silver dollar pancakes while having complete control. Once you flip them all over, then cook them uncovered, and the second side took about 1 minute. When the second side of the pancake is done, then remove them immediately from the stove top and put them into a serving dish. This will allow your silver dollar pancakes to cool before you serve them. If you're new to my channel, I'd like to mention that the link for the written printable mini pancake recipe and the link for all the videos mentioned will be posted and available to you in the description below. And if you want more breakfast recipes, please check out the end links for more tasty breakfast ideas. Now that the first batch is done, repeat the same steps until you have used up all of the batter. With the size of the crepe pan I was using, I had to make 5 complete batches, which I would have done anyway if I were making larger pancakes. However, this mini pancake method is a bit more work because you have to squeeze them out individually and flip them individually, but they are so much fun and look so special. They really do feel like a treat when you're eating them. And if you have small children, they will absolutely love them. However, even if you're making this for yourself, do make them as mini pancakes. Serve them in a bowl. If you're making this for yourself or just another person, you may be wondering what to do with the extra. Here's the good news. The mini pancake cereal, aka silver dollar pancakes, can be stored, covered with just cling wrap, and kept in your refrigerator for several days. Alternatively, the mini pancakes can be frozen, but you should store them in an airtight container before freezing. When you're ready to have your frozen pancakes, just take them out, reheat them in the microwave, or place them frozen on a parchment-lined baking sheet and bake in a preheated oven set to 350 Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for about 3 to 5 minutes. Now to dress these up, I like to serve these adorable little pancakes, as I said, in a bowl and topped with fresh raspberries. Or you can serve them with a syrup such as my sugar-free blueberry syrup, or actually any syrup of your choice. Since I'm keeping this recipe dairy-free, I also like to add a dollop of my Easy Keto vegan butter, but you can top it with whatever butter you choose. Now for the bloopers, my fails. The first thing I did was I greased my nonstick pan and squeezed out the medallions. This wasn't very successful because I found that the mini pancakes really spread out and became much larger than I wanted, and they flattened out quite a bit. They were still tasty, but not what I was after. Then I also thought, hey, why don't I make a bigger batch and put it in the oven? I thought that this method would speed up the process. For my first try, I greased the cookie sheet and then baked the mini pancakes in the oven. This absolutely did not work for several reasons. First, using the greased surface resulted in the pancakes flattening out, as you can see, into very large, flat, sticky discs. And the second fail for this method was that when I tried to remove them from the cookie sheet, they were sticky and they just fell apart. If you're wondering, I also tried doing this with parchment and not greasing the pan. This didn't work either. So for me, I found that the best result was using an almost dry or dry nonstick pan or crepe pan. This resulted in perfect mini pancakes every time. I hope that these tips, as well as the bloopers, will help you. Thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you'll come back and check out the next video I'll be posting. See you next time.